All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming. We're going to go ahead and get started. Just a few opening remarks here from myself and Scott Mahler. So hi everyone, my name is Kristen Pena. I'm with the Learning and Teaching Hub, and we are so excited that you are here for our end of semester social event with us. We will have a teaching panel kicking off in just a few moments here after our welcome remarks. And then after, we will have an informal poster session. So everyone's sort of been circulating already, checking out the posters, but we have two different groups represented here. So Principal to Innovation Fellow projects from the Polytechnic School, along with several of our communities of practice that the Learning and Teaching Hub run. So thank you for joining. All right, and with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Scott.
Thank you, Kristen, and thank all of you for being here. Great to see many familiar faces and some new faces. And thanks to many of you who came all the way out from Poly, who I know don't spend a lot of time here on the Tempe campus. We know that's a bit of a trek, so thank you. A little bit related to that, sort of housekeeping, if you don't have the ASU Alert app, especially for those of you who parked in the Tyler structure, what I learned is that apparently there were two peanuts walking through the parking structure there, and one of them was assaulted. Assaulted peanut. So please be careful. Please be careful when you go out there. Thank you for indulging me. Dad joke time. Dad joke time. No, really, I just want to say thank you all for being here. You know, spring is one of my favorite times of year. I think this partially comes from the fact that I spent so many years in the Midwest, and in spring is when the snow starts to melt and the sun starts to come out and it starts to be a beautiful time. The flowers are blooming. In Arizona, spring means a little something different, so I'm still changing that, but I still think it's a great time of year because it's also a great time for academics. And for most intents and purposes, it's the end of the academic year and a chance to breathe again and to think about what we're going to do in the future, what we've been doing, and to celebrate those things. And that's why we like to come together. It's also the time of March Madness. If you're familiar with the collegiate basketball tournament that happens every year in March. And if you're a fanatic and a fiend like I am, you know that at the end of the March Madness tournament, they always play this song. It's called One Shining Moment. And they have a montage of clips from throughout the tournament that you quickly realize is actually a series of shining moments. And those shining moments are representative of people stepping up to a challenge, to an adversity, and coming together with their team to conquer and to move forward beyond a task, a challenge, something that they didn't think could be done, that hadn't maybe been done before, but something that they've been training for their whole life in many cases. And for us in the institution, I think we've got some of those moments in time right now. We've had some of those moments in time. We've had them many times. And there's no clear definition of what a moment is. It's not necessarily a second. It might be a month. It might be a year. It might be 4 years. The impacts of it might go beyond 4 years. And we have many things right now that are forcing us to think about that moment, and I think in a good way. So there are political forces that are forcing us to ask ourselves questions about existential questions. Why are we here and why do we exist? AI, generative AI, is causing us to ask some of those same questions too. Not only how do we teach, how do we use AI, but what do we teach? Lynn and I were just talking about this earlier. Does it fundamentally change what we need to teach? These are important moments for us to think about, and it's part of the reason that I think it's great for us to come together, because I think It's together that we will challenge these moments, that we will find our solutions, and we will move forward. And I think ASU has been training for this for some time, and that we're well positioned. So I appreciate you all being here and look forward to taking on the challenges to come as we move forward. And with that, I'd like to hand it back over to Kristen so that we can get to our panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Okay, so the goals of our panel today are to highlight effective student-centered practices, to promote transparency and peer learning, and inspire continuous improvement. And this is the goals for our poster session as well, so hopefully you all have a chance to have some conversations or take something away from the panel today. That said, all of our panel members and our moderator have won the Top 5% Teaching Award. So just to sort of level set what that award is, faculty are nominated by students via course evaluations. They have taught 6 or more hours of classes with 19 or more students, and all course teaching evaluation scores, Part 2, are higher than expected average. So that's sort of the background of how this award is given, and really that this is instigated or nominated by students. And so our goal here isn't to highlight how faculty got nominated or how they won this, but really just to talk about what they're doing in their classroom, how they're putting their students in the center of teaching and learning. So with that, I'm going to introduce our panels. First, Ajay Bansal, who is a teaching professor in the School of Computing and Augmented Intelligence. He's been teaching for 17 years and teaches advanced data structures and algorithms at the graduate level, programming languages and paradigms, both graduate and undergraduate, and database design, undergraduate level. And his teaching areas of interest include discovery-based structured inquiry and reflective discussions approach to teaching problem solving. Next, we have Dhruv Bhate, an associate professor in the School of Manufacturing Systems and Networks. He has been teaching for 8 years and teaches hands-on manufacturing courses, microelectronics packaging, statistics in manufacturing, graduate courses in design, and metal additive manufacturing, principles of independent research. And his areas of teaching interest are how to make compelling hands-on curriculum, flipped classrooms, and video and multimedia in teaching. And he currently runs a community of practice around that as well. Next, Kristen Parrish, who is an associate professor in the School of Sustainable Engineering in the Built Environment. She's been teaching for 14 years, and she teaches construction and culture, like the history of construction course with around 400 students, retrofit construction, which is graduate course that explores how to keep our facilities evergreen over time, and intro to construction management, which is for first-year students. And her teaching areas of interest, well, teaching is her favorite part of her job, favorite, all caps. And her specific area of teaching interest is in active learning in large enrollment courses and trying to find new ways to make students feel engaged in courses. And then Ryan Milcarek is an associate professor in the School of Engineering of Matter, Transport, and Energy. He has been teaching for 7 years. He teaches intro to thermodynamics, experimental methods for mechanical engineers, combustion, and energy efficiency. His areas of interest are engineering education in teaching and research, peer-led study groups, which is similar to peer-led team learning, and active learning in large enrollment classes, as well as transfer student persistence. And last but not least, we are moderated today by Marnie Wong. Marnie is an associate teaching professor for academic and student affairs in the IRA Fulton Schools of Engineering here. She's been teaching for 10 years. She teaches our first year intro courses, so intro to engineering, sophomore and junior level technical courses, circuits 1 and 2, and engineering for humanity, which is an upper division design course with an anthropology twist. Her teaching areas of interest are around growth mindset, learning from failure, and mastery-based teaching. So welcome, panel members and moderator. We have one microphone, so I'm gonna help pass it along.
Thank you. And thank you all for being here. To start off, the first question I do want all of you to answer. So it really, because you have all won the Top 5% Teaching Award, the thing we want to know is sort of what that meant to you and what that signifies to you in winning that.
Well, certainly grateful for the students who nominated you. I think for me, it causes me to reflect upon what it means to teach effectively A lot of my teaching philosophy comes from this quote that says, basically, true intelligence is to take something that's great and mysterious and make it so simple that even a child could understand it. And so you can teach one person in the classroom really effectively and they can learn everything perfectly, but that doesn't work very well here at ASU. We have a lot bigger classes than that, and so it's about teaching in ways that a majority of the students can really understand and apply and ultimately do something with. And so that requires you to really know it so well and explain it in ways that anybody could understand it. And sometimes it requires a lot of different strategies to do that. So I think hopefully, it means being able to impact a lot of students and help them really understand and then be able to apply the things that they're learning in the class.
For me, I think I just want to say two things. The immediate thought when I got that was, I felt like, ASU values teaching after all. As a tenure track faculty, you get a lot of messages that may not be the most important thing compared to your research dollars that you bring in, etc. And then the second thing I noticed was it seemed to, all accomplishments, however big or small, fade away so quickly. But I think this one, because it's more of an emotional or hard to quantify why you got it exactly. I mean, why did the students nominate you is hard to quantify. So I think it has a longer half-life. So you feel happier about it longer than other things.
So I just realized that talking in front of students is so much easier than talking, because students believe whatever you say, right? You guys want. So for me, winning this award, and I've won it a few times, and so the very first time when I won it, and I'm like, what I've been doing? It's like, it's a validation of whatever methods, whatever your teaching philosophy that you have. And over time, I believe adaptability is a big part of teaching and continuous improvement. And I've been adapting over years, and with these awards, it does help in validating that the students are liking what you are doing. Many times they are not very vocal telling you back what directly to your face, what is working, what's not working, and so these awards sometimes help in keeping you going. And so I appreciate it.
So I would agree. I think my first thought was finally. I had it on my faculty goal to win that award since like my second semester here. It took, 8 or something to finally win. And then I won for 3 years and I was like, yes, I am the best at teaching. And then I didn't win for 3 more years and I was like, well, now what has happened? And so like any good faculty member, I was like, oh, well, obviously it's because my enrollment is down. And if I had a bigger class, I would surely have won again. Turned out that was not true. So that was a challenge, I guess, to overcome. But I think it especially after winning and then not winning, it really made me rethink, like, what could I be doing differently and what am I missing? And so I think what it really means to me is it's a way of getting the part of the feedback loop that says, like, yes, what you're doing is continuing to work. And it's making meaning for students. And that's really, in my opinion, like I wrote in my bio, I think that's really why at least I'm here. I used to work in a national lab, and there's great research that happens in a lot of different places, but to be able to teach and really integrate that's a unique function of university. So it was a validation of why I decided to leave my research career and take on the teaching part again.
Well, it's really interesting to hear how all of you, it motivated you, but it wasn't really your underlying motivation, right? You were doing these things, but it's nice to feel validated. So thank you. So individually, what does quality teaching really mean to you? So when we talk about, as this 5% award winner, you are doing quality teaching, what does that look like to each of you? And we don't have to go down the line if any of you want to.
So before I came to ASU, I was a manufacturing engineer, and quality in manufacturing is defined as the enemy of variation is the enemy of quality. So you want to reduce as much variation. But there's also a coupled idea in manufacturing which I think is applicable, and that's the idea of continuous improvement. And I've always felt like, it doesn't matter how good you are in the class, but are you doing something that you're striving to make better in the classroom? And then are you telling the students about the journey you're also having, making that improvement? I think that gets often translated as a quality experience, whether it should or shouldn't. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, that's great. Maybe one thought here that comes to mind. took a lot of classes over the years. And I found that the classes that made the biggest impact on my life were the ones that stretched me. We can always go make our classes easier, but that doesn't necessarily make better students. And so for me, quality teaching means making it hard and being quite honest about that with the students. You know, I love teaching thermodynamics and combustion because they're two of the harder classes in mechanical engineering. And I'll tell my students right the first day, this might be one of the hardest classes you've taken. But then my goal as an instructor is to kind of surround them with this thing they call in the literature kind of psychological safety. You know, you tell them it's going to be difficult, you're going to learn a ton, you're going to work hard, but you're going to come out of this feeling like I'm on your side, everyone here is trying to help you, we all want you to succeed, and hopefully when you come out of this, you're going to really be able to go and apply what you learned because you know it so well, and you're going to go and make a difference in the world and in the lives of others.
Okay, so I would say that quality teaching to me is having students remember the class beyond when it's over and beyond when they got the grade. And it's really like something in that classroom experience has stuck with them beyond. So I tell my students, like, I will consider this class to be a success if 5 years from now, as you are graduating from ASU, or 4 years from now, as you're graduating, or 3, whatever the case may be, right? If you are walking through the campus and you stop and for 10 seconds, you tell your parents or your family or anybody that's there to support you, I think that we made this building go right here for this reason, because that's really what my class is about. And it is the most rewarding thing to the quality teaching aspect when I either hear a student doing that on campus, which has only happened twice, but is super amazing, or when a student will write me an email later and say, you know, after your class, I decided to try an internship in construction and now I do it, or anything like that, because that says to me that the experience of the class, not necessarily exactly the content, but the experience of the class stuck with them. And I think that that's attributable to good teaching.
So I think quality teaching has many aspects, like it had been mentioned. There are many different things that go in, like engaging students in class, making them understand the purpose of your teaching or class, things, value addition that it'll do to them going forward, and also making them feel supported. And so I can go on forever, but I'll touch upon a couple of things here. So I remember this quote from Einstein once. He said that teaching should be such that what is being offered it comes out as a valuable gift, not as a hard duty. And so in my class, I always tell the students, keep reminding them of the purpose or what value addition this course is going to do to them going forward. Keep reminding them of the big picture where this can help them, and then keep them motivated. And one thing that I believe is that at all times, the vibe of the class or the teaching should be positive. Students learn best when they are motivated, as we know. And then, so keeping it positive doesn't necessarily mean that we have to, make a course easy, like Ryan said. It should be hard, but it should be such, in my mind, that everyone in the class has a fair chance of meeting the conditions. Everyone in the class, based on their preparation for the course, are able to at least think that they can meet the goals of the course or the assignments. And so keeping all that in place over the semester, I believe, results in good outcomes. And so I believe, in summary, that's what quality teaching would be.
Wonderful, thank you. Now, between the first two questions, all of you came back to this idea of adapting to students and adapting to their needs. I was wondering if any of you have an example of a time when you had to sort of adapt your teaching based on student feedback or student challenges that you were experiencing in your classrooms.
Okay, so mine actually, I worked with Peter on this one, so shout out to the Learning and Teaching Hub. I have a research paper in my graduate class, and I was finding increasingly that I felt like the papers were created with generative AI. And while I wasn't necessarily against that, I felt like it was really challenging for me to assess the students the way that I had historically assessed them, because I was expecting that they were doing the research on their own and they were reading the papers on their own and they were really absorbing the material and then repackaging it to write about it. And I just started to see that seemed to be less and less what was happening, and people were just seeing it as like, well, you said I had to write a paper, so I wrote a paper. And so I worked with Peter, and I actually changed the assignment to be use generative AI, produce a paper, and then tell me where it did a good job and tell me where it did a terrible job. And then I gave a big introduction to the assignment of this is important to me because I want you to be a responsible user of this technology. And it has been the most transformative thing for me, and I think for the students. I mean, it forced me to learn about generative AI, which I probably otherwise would not have done. And it also has been something that the students continuously report, like, it's so helpful. I had never used that tool before, which, let's be real, yes, you were. But then they said, I had never used it before, but you really opened my eyes, and it's so great. And so that was another, it's just been a really neat thing to adapt to that and try to embrace a new technology instead of saying, like, it's not welcome here.
I think these days educators face more challenges than students, right, with all the generative AI, and so we have to adapt. And so over years I'm trying to think, I teach 2 of the 3 core classes in software engineering program, and so these core classes are designed for every incoming student has to take them, and it's more like leveling the playing field so that students coming from various backgrounds can get into the program with the knowledge they need. And usually these are large classes. And so one time in my evaluation I had, for the same course, multiple students said that the course is too slow, and some said course is too fast. And then some said the course is at the right pace, and I'm like, how do I solve this problem, right? And so at the same time, and so then I was looking into, and I got into how students learn, and then I realized that the prerequisite knowledge is very important, otherwise it's hard for them to learn forward. And then looked into some pedagogical approaches, and what I found is that I have to assume that they have minimal prerequisite knowledge. And then what I started doing is, instead of teaching them concepts, I started presenting those concepts as problems in class. And so it's like I would tell them that this concept, there was a time in history when this concept did not exist. What existed was a problem. And somebody solved that problem using that concept, right? I mean, by inventing that concept. And so let's try and see so this approach, I think, requires very minimal prerequisite knowledge, and the students who know actually can learn more from that approach, learn creative thinking, learn, they're not intimidated, and in class, we try to invent a concept rather than learn a concept, reinvent a concept. And so that adaptation has helped quite a bit, and students feel more, less intimidated if they are not prepared for the course. And then throughout the journey, I think various students, depending on their preparation, would learn at different levels, but then they all feel that they have been supported in this process.
I really like that, actually. I do a lot of problem solving. I think that's a great way with students. I remember, I think one thing that comes to mind is my first semester teaching. I had kind of adapted an approach like that, and it seemed to be working for, I would say, 60 to 80% of the class. Most of them were doing really well. There was this one girl I'll never forget. It was about, probably the last month of the class, and she finally came to me and said, I'm struggling. And she had done well in every single class she'd ever taken before. And this was the first time she's a senior, she's trying to graduate, never struggled before. And for whatever reason, thermodynamics, and for those of you who have taken it, was just that hard one for her. And I spent time with her. She came to office hours, we practiced problems. She would go, we'd do a problem similar to an exam problem, that we'd been working on in class. She'd do it in front of me, we'd go and take the exam, and she'd struggle. And I just thought, what I'm doing is good, but it's not reaching everybody. And so that really kind of sent me back to the drawing board, said, how do I reach these students that just can't get past that? There's a portion of them. So the next time I taught the class, because it was at the end, I asked these students who are struggling, come and see me. And I learned some things. One, I learned that a lot of them were transfer students. This is the first class a lot of transfer students take when they come into this particular program. That kind of opened my eyes to some things. And then I got talking with a colleague about some things, and he introduced me to this thing, what we call the Treisman model, peer-led study groups, which we learned later, although it's not attributed to Treisman, they adopted it later and they call it peer-led team learning. And the idea is that you solve problems in peer groups primarily, and really you're co-constructing knowledge of the course with social interactions that build confidence in your understanding while also developing interdisciplinary knowledge of a specific class. So that's kind of the whole thing that happened. And I'll never forget, just to kind of tell you, jump to the conclusion, we had this one girl come in. She joined one of our study groups. We've implemented this in all of our thermodynamics courses. All students now take this. But this one girl comes in, and she comes into her first group, and she says to everyone in the group, I'm not very smart, but this is what I think we should do. Next time she comes in, I don't know if I really know what I'm doing, but this is what I think we should do. Third class, she comes in. This is what we should do. And we saw in real time her confidence just completely change. She realized that she always talked herself down those first couple sessions, but by the third one, she realized that she was pretty much always right. She rarely made mistakes. And then that confidence gave her the ability to succeed when under high-stress environments like an exam. And so we found that this method it helps everybody. Everyone improves, but who helps the most are the students who struggle, especially those who don't have a good, maybe a lot of social support when they initially come in. If they're transfer students, for example, we've seen they're about 3 times more likely to pass the class by just solving the problems this way rather than going to a traditional recitation. 1 hour a week, just changing how we run that hour, huge difference. That's statistically significant over hundreds of students that have taken the class. So she
I asked what happened to the woman from the first time he taught.
She didn't get the grade she wanted. She didn't. I didn't have this method, back then, and so we gave it everything we had, and she finished the class and she graduated and did fine, but she didn't walk out feeling confident about the course like I wanted her to, and so that was a loss.
Thank you. So those are some really creative ways to deal with those difficult situations. So in your academic journey, when you're trying to learn how to teach students better and to come up with these ideas, was there anyone or any resource or any particular training that helped prepare you for that?
For me, it was the learning and teaching hub, and I'm not just saying that. Before I came to ASU, I was at Intel Corporation and for about 8 years, and when we have to learn, Intel hires PhDs with no necessary skills for a specific task. We believe that any PhD should be able to do anything, within reason. So let's hire a bunch of them and get them trained fast and effectively on what they need to know. And in keeping with that, the training was always conducted by a supplier who would come buy a machine, and if you needed to learn how to operate a lithography machine or something, you would get trained on that machine either at the supplier site so you would basically get trained at the place where you need to do the work in a manner that you would actually be doing. So when I came to ASU, I said I wanna copy this approach. I don't want to spend too much time in a classroom. I want to get everybody, and because we're a school of manufacturing, we have a lot of manufacturing equipment. But how do we do it at scale? And that's where the L&T Hub, I don't know how many of y'all know Nick Lindquist, but he came up to me and said, you know what, we can record you with multiple cameras and mic you up, and you can tell students how to run these machines. And I was like, how do I pay for this? And he was like, don't worry, we'll. So we somehow did an entire class with lots of videos where students watch those videos ahead of time. And now the latest thing that Nick's team is helping me with is interactives, where we can create 3D replicas of manufacturing equipment so students can interact with it in a virtual environment before coming in. But that's been enormous. Like, every class I now look at, I'm like, what can I ask Nick to do for me? And that would help me out because it really frees up classroom time for me to have fun, with my students. And so that is the biggest asset that I have leveraged and benefited from.
I read this line on one of educators' homepage, and he wrote that, I am teaching, but are they learning? And so once I read that, it hit me that up until that point, this happened a few years back, I'm like, I have never thought about, I always think about how I can improve my teaching, but never ask students. Or I used to get feedback, but not to the point where I thought that, no, I need to overhaul all my courses, my whole teaching philosophy towards making sure that they are learning. And so one adaptation that I did was that I believe in my courses, learning starts with questions and not answers. My whole semester starts with questions. The first class is all about questions. If students don't have questions, they don't know anything at this point. But I put questions in their mind and then I answer them. And then every lecture, I would present them with questions that I'm going to answer over the course of the lecture. And so So I think that it's very, very important that we evaluate whether students are learning not with the midterm or the final exam, but in every lecture as we move forward. And that has helped me over time adapt and make courses better.
I'll just piggyback on that actually Keith is in the room. So Keith Helmstad came to our school's advance and talked about mastery-based learning and project-based learning and problem-based learning and all sorts of active learning strategies. And I found that really inspirational. So I overhauled my whole class and tried to do it. It kind of worked, kind of didn't. But it was really inspiring just to think about new ways to approach the class and to really be asking questions, assessing mastery instead of like, how did you do on this one exam? And did you memorize this thing? So that was helpful. And then several years later, I think, is when we had JTFD. And that was I think, just-in-time faculty development program. And there was a small cohort of us that really worked on learning about how to be better teachers. We did it in a peer group. So it built, I think, all of our confidence about how to teach. And so that was really, really helpful. And then I feel like I've missed out, but I met Stephanie last week and I told Stephanie that I'm going to invite her to my class in the fall so I can learn more about how to be a more engaging faculty member.
So building on that idea of who helped you and what helped you, as people who have started to adapt and use these resources, is there any advice that you want to give people that are trying to strive to improve and make their courses more student-centered? Besides obviously bringing in Stephanie, that's a given.
I don't know what more I can really add here other than saying I think that was great advice. Ask your students. I mean, I think I ask my students regularly, almost every week, maybe every class, how's it going? What are you struggling with? Just take those few minutes at the beginning to kind of connect. And then when they come into office hours, I'm always asking them, how are things going? What are you struggling with? What makes sense? What doesn't make sense? What can we improve? I ask a lot of questions. I interrogate my students maybe, but in good ways. I want to know what they're thinking, what they're feeling. And if I can I always am trying to have a good pulse on where the students are by asking those questions. That's just trying to understand what they're thinking, what they're feeling. If everyone comes to me and tells me I'm really struggling, not with your class right now, there's a turbulence exam that's driving me nuts, and half my students are in turbulence. Okay, I'll think about that. What can I do? Maybe my assignment was due today, but I can push it back one day. It's not going to make a big difference, and that'll help them to study and then do better on my class. Like little tweaks, but you have to ask questions and have that kind of relationship with them to be able to do it.
Yes, advice for maybe the faculty of people to do. See, one thing, I'll start with something light then. One thing I learned over time is the students don't understand sarcasm very well. And so please don't trying to make them learn worse. So it just so happens that my wife is also a faculty in the same program. She's actually the program chair of the program that I teach in. And so imagine, yes. And so every semester I tell my students that, let them know. And I tell them that, see, don't get me in trouble. It affects me at home as well. So not just here. And then every now and then I'll get an email from a student, a very serious email. Oh, professor, I totally understand that. I promise I'll never get you in trouble. I will come to you if there's anything and not go to her. And I'm like, oh my God. So please, yes, I try sarcasm, but then I explain it to them, just in case. But yes, to piggyback on what Ryan said, that I absolutely believe that empathy is a key to creating that good vibe that I was talking about before. Students do have life outside of our classroom, and sometimes making a little bit of a leeway for them goes a long way. One time I was given an advice. This is very early in my career. That, oh no, you need to discipline students, otherwise they don't listen to you. I mean, discipline them as you will discipline your kids. And I think I have better chance with my students than kids, and so kids don't listen to me, but students. So in any case, I think, so I used to start strict, but then over time I've realized that from the very get-go, if you build a rapport with students, if they feel supported in your course, if they feel that if there is a need, they can get a little bit of flexibility. I think they keep up with the course and not feel discouraged that at any point they don't have hope. And so I think that is important.
I just want to add one thing, and I struggle with, the challenge for me often is I can make this class very inspiring, I can make it very entertaining, we're all going to have a great time, but it comes at some cost of rigor for me. And often I struggle with that, because when I look back at my own undergraduate education, there are many courses that were hard, and I took them and because I had to get through them. But when I emerged on the other side, I was not inspired to continue learning that subject. And I feel sometimes it's like, are we saying that I'm going to teach you this subject in one semester, and that is it, and you're not going to learn calculus again? Why is that? Why do we say take Calc 1, Calc 2, Calc 3, and 10 years later, you're not going to be interested in Calc because you already did it? So I always struggle with that. I don't have a solution for it. So, but my advice is that we must inspire first, and rigor can come after, because I don't believe that this is the last word on this subject. But if I can leave you into the world where you have a love of this topic, I think I've done my job. But it's still something I haven't fully solved.
That is really excellent advice. I mean, all the things that you guys are doing take a lot of energy and effort. So how do you stay energized and motivated, especially when you get a tough semester of students?
That's a tough question. And only because every semester is challenging. And to me, going to the classroom has been the most exciting part. I've been boycotting teaching. I've been on sabbatical, and then I had so much research going on that I bought out. So this whole last year, I haven't taught a class, and I've been starting to think to myself, who am I anymore? And I've really honestly missed that part every day. Like it is a lot of work to go to the classroom, and it is a lot to do that while balancing everything else. And every semester is challenging for different reasons. But going there and doing it, if you really just love seeing students understand, get it, have it click, if you really love that, I mean, hopefully you walk out of that experience feeling really good. Then, despite all the emails that you get that, or you have to go through, and some of them aren't as nice as others that you work through, hopefully that's energizing and that's exciting, and that's what actually gets you through the hard semesters.
Yeah, it's hard for me. It's like, any good exercise where the hardest part is getting out the door. But then once you start it, you're like, this is great. So teaching is like that for me. I do struggle to prepare for classes. This semester I taught 3, and it was the most I'd ever done, which I know many of y'all do much more than that. And I just blocked out Monday. The entire day I was doing nothing else but teaching preparation, and then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday I would teach. But I don't know. It is, if you rely on your cues from students or student feedback, you almost become too attached to that, and you're like always looking at the student to say, is this working for you? Is this good? And you may try 10 things that half the class likes, but you'll always find a quarter saying, this was not my learning style, or I wish you hadn't. Some will say you dumbed it down too much. Some, like Ajay said, So what I've ultimately come to try and do is I want to get to the ideal where I only want to teach what I want to learn myself. And so kids, it doesn't matter if you guys are learning anything, but I'm having a good time. And it's hard to do because you have to talk to the program chair, and there are lots of, but I'm trying to do more and more of that. Like if I want to learn something, I'm going to say, hey, I want that course. I want to teach that course. And when that happens, then I feel more energized. And then I'm not teaching anything more than 3 times or so, and I'm just moving to a new course. I'm trying that out as well, and that's been helping as well, instead of teaching the same thing over and over again.
I always, whenever it gets hard, I think of the potential impact that we as educators can make. And I look at my class, and I've been teaching at ASU for 15 years now. And I started with maybe class of 20 students, and now it's 200 plus very easily. And over time, as more strength grew, I'm like, it's harder and harder. But then I realized that with almost the same amount of effort, and maybe a little more, I'm able to make a much bigger impact I'm like, with 200 students in one class, once they learn something from me, they'll go out there, and then they'll learn more. That potential impact that I can have being at ASU with large classes is what keeps me going, even though it's a little counterintuitive. But I keep thinking of that, and then it is hard with large classes, with so many emails, with students struggling. Like mentioned, there are students on the bottom of the thing, the students at the top, and then handling them in different ways. But then whenever I think of the impact that you're making to students, it helps.
Yeah, I think mine's similar. I find that I stay energized for teaching by really seeing it as an opportunity to meet students where they are, to understand what's happening. I have an 18-year-old child, so I'm also like, oh, this is a peek into her world, which is fascinating because as a mom, right, they don't want you around. So I think that that's been helpful. And every day that there's been some days where I'm walking to class and it's 118 degrees outside, and you're like, I hate this. What am I doing? And then those are the days that I get in and I just tell the students, like, hey guys, it's hot out. This is hard, but construction's amazing. Let's go. And I think that it helps all of us to we just acknowledge that some days are hard and some material might feel boring, but it's really important and it has its place. And so I think I kind of try to fall back on not only what do I want to learn, but what does knowing the thing that I'm going to talk about today do for you in your career, in your educational journey, right? Some people are just taking it because they need a humanities credit. That's fine. And that seems to help re-energize. And then I think the class usually responds really positively. And then that makes me excited all over again.
So looking into the future, what do you think engineering education is going to look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now? What big changes do you see?
Okay. Just because I made a snarky comment. No. So I said my comment was all online. I don't actually believe that will be the case, but I do think more and more thoughts about how we can scale things is going to be important. I read a paper in the American Society of Engineering Education conference proceedings about test anxiety and thought it was compelling. So I eliminated tests in my class a while ago. And I think that that's been really successful. I think the students have responded really positively. And I think I'm getting a better sense for what they're actually absorbing with the projects that they do. So that's been great. So I think it will be more of that, more of moving away from the way I learned and into the way that new people learn. And also just being honest with ourselves about what people's attention spans are. I don't think that people can pay attention for 45 minutes. I'm impressed that all of you are still listening to us.
So yeah, I think it's no surprise that AI is going to have a big impact in the next few years, and I think it can be a positive impact that we can have individualized learning with technology that we have now, and every student may have a personal tutor with Gen AI. Sometimes the tutor might do more than what the students intends, or when we have to worry about that. But I think that going forward, we have to take that into consideration, that students have access to the technology and how we can adapt our courses so that we can help them use AI for their benefit rather than for just submitting assignments that they haven't done. But yeah, so I think that'll be a big impact. Students being able to learn, study things at different pace, and if online comes in, then it can be a more asynchronous learning. And what Dhruv said, it could be flipped. And so in class, we can be more of a facilitators rather than the primary educators. And all those changes we'll have to adapt to for sure in the next few years.
Only thing to add to that, I imagine, that if there's any information we are passing on, that's going to go. There's going to be something that can do it better than I can. I'm not the best professor in my subject, but we will have the best professor in 5-10 years delivering the content. So I think when I think back to undergrads who are fresh from high school or from community college, at that age, I think college is an experience, and courses are just a scaffold of this experience that is college. When I think about all the important things that happened to me, John Lennon has a saying, life is what happens while you're busy making other plans. I tell my students that, education is what happens while you're busy missing class. But the key word there is busy, because you're playing hockey for ASU, or like some of my students give me these letters that they're going to miss class because of playing hockey, or you're in Baja Club and you guys have a final or whatever to go to. So I think college is going to become more like that, and I think if we can take our courses and the content that we want to deliver and make it some kind of a real-world experience, I think that's where we are going. But ultimately, I think people will still come because we want to hang out with each other. We want to learn from each other. And I think faculty will have to get into that mix of learning with each other and being part of that network that we're building. How will it scale? I don't know. But yeah, that's just some thoughts.
This is a hard question for researchers, because you start thinking, boy, well, it depends on these factors, and each of those factors could go this way, and then there's these other things that could happen, and I haven't even analyzed the data yet. How do you want me to answer this question? But I think, as I think back, I was impressed many years ago. I read a study. They analyzed tons of students, tons of institutions. They were trying to figure out what was the one factor that led to student success. And they only found one variable led to student success in the classroom. Of everything they looked at, all these different institutions, thousands of students, it was the connection they felt with the faculty. And I could be wrong, but I suspect that's not going to go away quickly. And teaching's been going on a long time. Different tools. I was talking to somebody the other day, and they talked about how a calculator changed everything in education years ago, and they thought it was going to be the downfall of algebra and all that. We've survived that. I think we've made it through. But I think the key to learning and inspiring the next generation is still going to be on us to make that connection, to make them feel important, to make them feel like they can make a difference. And so hopefully that's not changing. That's just based on historic data. I'll take that over guessing what's going to happen.
Thank you. So lastly, for the audience, what is one thing that you would like people to walk away from this panel thinking about, or remembering, or considering for their future teaching aspirations?
Can I have two?
Yeah.
One thing comes to mind. I think of this question. Think about your strengths. I tell people this sometimes. I don't know about you, but I actually enjoy really listening to Michael Crow. He's just a really good speaker. You're going to go to tell Michael Crow, you can't speak anymore. You need to go and flip your classroom and don't talk anymore. Just give them problems and have them solve them in groups and that. I think that would be a loss. He's really good at conveying a message that he's passionate about. So think about what your strengths are. Just because there's lots of good ways to do it, don't feel like you have to become somebody completely different overnight. If you're doing something that's working, that's connecting with students and helping a majority, don't keep doing it. There's better ways, and keep looking for those who aren't understanding. But don't be afraid to play to your strengths. Everyone has talents. Everyone has abilities. Every learner's different. You're going to be able to communicate and work with people that other people can't connect with as well. So keep playing to your strengths. That's one thought that comes to mind.
Yeah, if I can just double down on that, I think I've never. I don't think any of us have cracked teaching, and I think my one key takeaway is that I think it's just we just got to express ourselves, and in different contexts, I may not be very good of an instructor, but in the context that I am given and assigned and the way I teach it, I think that's the beauty of this job, right? We are interacting with human beings, and a lot of that interaction is emotional, it's psychological, and we've got this subject that we are talking about and discussing. So I think, just express yourself and keep getting better at that expression.
I'm also going to reiterate the theme that connection is very important. Connection with students is I believe, that keeps them going, that keeps you going. I remember during COVID days, we all switched to Zoom classes. And I remember that during the class, I would make a joke, but nobody's laughing. And then I make another one, nobody's laughing. And then after some time, I realized that they're all laughing, but they're all muted. Nobody's going to unmute, laugh, and then mute back again, right? So that connection was severed. I mean, I'm like, is it even working? I don't know. And so I believe that talking to students, meeting them in person, and trying to spend time with them, let them feel supported as well as connect with you, and then you can motivate them and make them learn, is what I believe. And so I think that's one advice that I will have, that make sure that you connect with students. And the second thing is, I hope you feel empowered for adapting to various strategies that have been discussed. I think we have to constantly adapt. We have to constantly improve based on the feedback that we receive. Otherwise, it's no fun for them as well as for us. Right?
Yeah, AJ stole mine, but I was just going to keep trying new things. I think it's really fun to do things differently, learn a new tool and challenge yourself and your students to use it. ChatGPT is like really weird, also kind of cool. Right? I learned that, and I think that it's been really fun, and and then you get to learn right along with students, and that's also a really good time.
Yes, I want to add that ChatGPT sometimes can surprise you. So I take my assignments these days, put it to ChatGPT, and the answers that ChatGPT gives, I mean, they're much better than what I have been thinking. I'm like, right. So I can learn, so students can learn too, I guess. But when I see those solutions in my submissions, I'm like, no, I haven't taught you this, and so how did you know? And so, yes, but ChatGPT is cool. I like it.
So one thing keeps coming back, and I want to I think maybe I should just share this. You can view yourself in two ways as a teacher. You can view yourself as a taskmaster and say, you've got to get over this bar, jump higher. Or you can be coach. You can be coach saying, I'm going to try and help you get over that bar. And that mindset of teaching makes a big difference. Are you coach or are you taskmaster? That makes a big difference in how your students are going to view you as well, and how you're going to approach a lot of things. And then the other thing that I was thinking earlier is just be careful about accepting what other people tell you and just running with it. I remember when I first started, my first years, a faculty told me, don't post your notes. If you post your notes, no one will come to class. Post notes, no class attendance. That was the equation. I posted my notes before class. I posted my notes after class. I had 70 to 90% attendance. That didn't hold true in my class. So just, some faculty might have found some things that are true for them, but that doesn't mean it's going to be exactly the way it is in your class. So don't just take what somebody tells you at face value. We're all different teachers. We're all different. All of our students are different. There's some things that might work really, really well for you and may not for others. Look at the research. Research generally gives us good indications of what works for the majority, but there's always a little bit of individualism in all of it, right?
So one thing that has helped me also is, I read somewhere that awesome means some awe. And so I believe awesome lectures are lectures in which you put some awe. And it has worked a lot for me. I try to bring in every lecture, whatever concept I'm teaching, I'll look into the history of the concept and try to bring some anecdote, try to bring some surprising element for that concept, and the students get excited, motivated to learn. And so I look at every class, and I purposely include something that would surprise the students. That has helped. Yeah.
Thank you all. There's an obvious reason why you have all won the Top 5% award. Listening to you talk and your insights are very helpful. And does anyone in the audience have any questions for our panel? I can bring the microphone over if anyone has any questions for them.
I think to some extent you're preaching to the choir here. It's a wonderful choir. I love this choir. But what I want to know is how you personally impact your colleagues. How do you rub off on your colleagues in teaching?
Our program has a lot of faculty associates, and so our program chair has encouraged faculty associates to partner with tenure track faculty or full-time teaching faculty. And so I've raised my hand to do a few of those to try to start kind of organically partnering and doing that. And then I also think sharing in faculty meetings and other communities, that, like you said, this is a really lovely choir. So that tends to be who shows up to the teaching communities of practice. But sharing with your colleagues when something works, posting on LinkedIn when something works, I think has all been ways that has helped to try to move the needle or get a little more innovative with teaching.
For us, I think it helps a little that we have a smaller program. Software engineering is on Poly campus, and we are about 12 faculty members, and so we are like a small family, and we meet often. We do, like after faculty meeting, we'll do some potluck, and so that's where we exchange ideas. Many times it turns into, whining about student sessions, but somewhere, all the challenges that we are facing and things, but sometimes in those comes out like what we are doing to help the situation, and it goes into like different teaching methods and how we handle students in class. And with those, I think it helps connect with our fellow colleagues as well as share notes on how we can do better.
So prior to this semester, I never thought about or got into anybody else's teaching methods, because I'm like, everybody protects their little classroom territory, and why should I, who am I to tell you how to teach a class? But this semester, for the first time, at least for us, we instituted the peer teaching evaluation, which there was a form floating around that I don't know where it came from, that, but it was never required of our faculty to do a peer teaching evaluation if you were going up for tenure, etc., or for promotion. But we just started it this semester, and for the first time, I had license. I guess I could have always gone, but I had a reason to go and sit in one of my colleagues' classroom and actually see how they run their classroom. And in my mind, nobody's a good teacher. I'm the only one who cares about teaching. But obviously that's not true. And I go and see other faculty, and they're doing some things that I'm not doing. So even though my intent was to evaluate them, at least we have a conversation, and the process is you meet with them 30 minutes before the class, you attend their class, and then you meet with them 30 minutes after. You write up this form and you submit it to the director, and it's supposed to go on their file, for tenure consideration. So that's been very helpful. We just started it this semester in earnest, and it was very eye-opening. Like Ryan was saying, there was this instructor who, to me, was so dry, but at one point they started to solve a problem on the board, with old school, like everything they were doing was PowerPoint, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna mark you down for just, PowerPointing your way through this. But then they took a problem and they started to ask students, can you solve this? What did you get back there? 4? 4, okay, 4, and they continue solving the problem. And I was like, I had never thought of doing a collaborative problem solving on the whiteboard together. And then they get the wrong answer. And he's like, who messed up over here? So that was just one small cool thing that I never thought of in 8 years of teaching. So I think that was very helpful, and I think we should all be doing that more often. Very, very positive things.
This is a good question. I prefer to just keep my doors closed and not talk, but and work on my calculator. No, I think the biggest way that I've interacted with other faculty really has been through the study group effort. So I taught thermodynamics a bunch for my first 2 years. We figured this study group thing out. We got it going. We were getting good data. And then I really haven't taught it since. And the study groups have still been going because I've been mostly just doing it behind the scenes. So that I go to the faculty and tell them, we've done this. This is the data. We can show you how much better it is than doing recitations the old way. And then I just go and meet with the student, our facilitators who conduct those and run them. So we even though I haven't been teaching the class in a long time, I've continued to coach and teach our peer-led study group leaders just to help them. And I have to keep the instructors in the loop, though. I have to continually meet with them every semester and just tell them, this is why we're doing it, this is the advantages, and they're happy to say you can continue to do this with our students. And so I don't think it's an imperfect process, but to the extent possible, if we find something that's working, don't be afraid to share it, and recognize that everyone's different and has their different strengths. You can't make anyone do a different way, but in some cases, like in changing a recitation format, this has worked really well, and a lot of other people have allowed me to have buy-in on that.
Scott and Kristen would get mad at me if I did not mention the communities of practice, but you already know that, Keith. So, but we do have communities of practice focused on specific aspects. I guess the question is, how do we encourage and motivate people to join and participate? And then how do lazy champions like me actually make sure it's moving forward? But I think that's another great initiative that we have.
Hello, I'm not from Fulton, I'm from Ed Plus. So my question is in reference to, are you guys opening these community of practices to faculty outside of engineering? Because if so, I'd love to advertise that.
I'm going to answer this for the panel. Absolutely. We have some people from the math department, from health and bio.
My question is more towards items that you guys had all mentioned, equity, inclusion, pedagogy. With those stuff in mind, how do you guys, I guess, also in terms of foreseeing the future, I don't know if you've been paying attention, but with the current administration, how do you think that that's going to impact the way you teach, or how you guys, I guess, continue to make these connections with students who may already been having struggles, especially for international students or students that already having outside struggles that don't always mention or make it to the classroom?
I think we just don't have to call them those things and just continue doing a lot of inclusion and equity that we do. So about me coming to the country as an international student, I have seen how things have changed over time, and then I'm able to relate to students. I have a lot of international students in my graduate class, and many times they would open up. Once you show them that they can open up, once you connect with them, they'll tell you the problems. And then I think every case is different because they have different problems. And so having the experience and knowing about what's going on and how, like for visa revocation, for example, and other things, students are very, very worried. I mean, I know, for example, of one of the girls in my class, she actually had a roommate who suddenly got aggressive. And she could not go complain to anybody, because she did not want the roommate to get in trouble as well as her to get in trouble. And so, but she was able to go to the ISSC, and then ISSC could step in without having to tell any officials. They were able to solve the problem. They talked to the professors, and the student could take the exams online and things like that, and we are able to solve the problem. And so what I'm saying is that it could be different problems, different cases, but knowing the services that ASU allows helps in trying to help the students. And so I would say, yeah, there are things that we can do, and it's just that we need to know how to do it. So.
Great question, Jay. You know, this is something I experimented with last semester. Every fall I teach a course called EGR 602, Principles of Independent Research. This is a required course for all new PhD students, at least in our programs. And it is meant to teach them how to be PhD students, and how to succeed. So we talk about everything from literature review to get a job interview and how to get a postdoc. What are the different career options you have post-PhD? And in a class like that, I had about 25 students, and I would keep saying, if anybody wants to talk about any issues y'all are having, anything that you think I can help with, please come to me. And 1 or 2 students came the entire semester, even after I said, I will even take y'all out for lunch free. So I did that 2 years ago. And then the 2 students that did come, it's not just that I don't know how much I was able to help them, but it suddenly felt much more meaningful to me that I was able to, that they felt like they could talk to me about this stuff, and I was able to just give them my opinion and my thoughts, etc. So last semester, I made it required that every student meets me 30 minutes in the first 3 weeks of the class, and again at the end of the semester for 5% of their grade. Now, I couldn't do this in a thermodynamics course. Why would you do it? But what I'm getting at is, I think we need a course like that is about the student and not about a subject. And like ASU 101, but I don't think the ASU 101 structure creates one-on-one sessions with an instructor. And I've always felt like we need something like that. And because every course is about something, but where is a course about me, and my life and my career? And I just came here because, my peers and my parents and said, go apply to these schools, and here I am. But I don't know what to do with my life. And so in a way, what I'm saying is just the way I wouldn't talk to my kids and say, you guys are different in some way. I'll be fine if whatever life path you choose. I can't do that, but I can always say, I'm here for you if you do have something that the mainstream does not encourage and you're contrarian in some way. So I think I've now come to the feeling that I'd rather not call out anything or make room for anything, but just try and force everybody to make room with me just to have a conversation and see where it goes. And so far, I've not been able to do it in more than that one class. It takes a lot of time. It doesn't scale at all. But I think we need something like that. We don't, a lot of my senior undergrads, they would rather spend time learning about their career options and with me improving their CVs and telling them to make portfolios. Why is your LinkedIn so crappy? You know? And these are the things that I do this in my last class, and some of them are like, I'm finally liking your class, you know. Why didn't you start with something I could actually use? So I don't know. Sorry, I went on a bit of a rant.
No, this is a great question, and I don't have like any current semester experience. I wasn't teaching this semester, but one thought that comes to mind during the pandemic, spring 2020 semester was when we launched our study group effort. We launched it after the first exam got over, which means our first week of launch was the first week after spring break, and so we went right online for our very first study group session. We only had 4 students because I was just piloting this, trying to figure out, you know, how do I help these students that are really struggling. And there was one student in particular, I'd asked them to come and meet with me if they were struggling, and I learned a little bit about his story. Transfer student kind of was a typical theme, you know, moved here from California, living on a friend's couch, you know, just really challenging circumstances he was trying to get through. And so I knew a little bit about him. He goes into the study group. Study groups are going great. He gets towards the end of the semester, and I asked, you know, check in with my study group leaders and say, how's things going? He said, hey, you know, so-and-so, he hasn't shown up for the last 2 or 3 weeks. And I said, well, that's not good. Have you reached out to him? Because he'd, you know, I had a connection with him, but, you know, obviously the study group leader had a really good connection with him by that point. And so he did. And this is what we learned after the fact. The student had been struggling. COVID was very, very hard on a lot of students, especially in a circumstance like he was in. And he decided about 2 weeks before the semester ended that he wasn't going to pass, so he just was done. He was done with the class. He was going to give up. Well, because of that email that was sent, and I think I sent one, I think my student study group leader sent one as well, he showed up for the very last study group session, decides to take the final, passes the class because he took the final exam. And then, you know, everything kind of worked out. He didn't get behind. I mean, if he had failed that class as a transfer student, it would have been really detrimental for him. But it was, I think the theme we're catching here is that you have to have a way to connect with students. And you may not have that ability as an instructor, but if you have a really good teaching team around you with students, you know, if you've got touch points where you can at least know them individually, use that and just be, I always start off when I meet with my facilitators, I'm always asking them, how are things going? What are the students feeling? What are they saying? You know, or you know, I'm always trying to have those feel points, and they'll mention things. Oh, this person did this. Oh, this person did this. Well, this is maybe a good way to address that situation. And so you work with your student team to give them some ideas on how they can become better instructors and interact with individuals. And that just broadens your reach as an instructor. So that's something that I found that might be applicable in this case.
Well, thank you all so much. I think that's the end of the panel. So appreciate all of you for sharing your insights.
Thank you so much also to Marnie, our moderator today. Round of applause for her. All right, well, that was the formal panel. The rest is checking out any of our posters, enjoying more food and drink. We have Principled Innovation Fellow projects as posters. So if you don't remember what Principled Innovation is, now is your chance. The framework is right over there, and feel free to check out those posters, chat with everyone. We also have several communities of practice, as was mentioned. I didn't pay Dhruv to say that, but we appreciate it.